In today's video, we are going to look at how to create a more advanced terrain using Cave Engine. So this is a question that many people have requested me, how to create advanced terrains. And I'm specifically talking about the painting of the terrain to have multiple materials and all that add-ons. So I'm here with a project that we've been working on. Let me actually change back to the default to the terrain material so I can see it a little bit better. So this is a terrain, the default terrain in Cave, and Cave Engine have a bunch of tools for the terrain creation and editing. If I go here, if I select my terrain and click here in the terrain tool or shift 2, I will be able to quickly do a bunch of stuff. Regular terrain stuff, I can sculpt my terrain. Let me actually create a more crazy thing here in the horizon. Just to show you, I can add some noise. And then I can finally, let's actually do something crazy nice and big here. By the way, I can disable the mist so we can see the terrain a little bit better. And of course, this is the sculpting of the terrain in Cave, very quick. I'm just finish this because I'm excited. I always get excited. This is a problem that I have when it comes to creating terrain. Even for a tutorial, I get too excited and I spend like half an hour creating the terrain. It's super nice. But anyways, so this will be enough. We have a bunch of tools here, but one thing that people don't really understand is how to paint the terrain. Because if you click here in the texture paint, which is the tool that Cave Engine have that allows you to paint the terrain, you can see that we need to create a blank textures in the asset browser to start painting. Then we need to select it, but it's not very clear how to apply this to the terrain. And this is the exact video that you are looking for if you want to create a custom terrain. So before we go to the tutorial, this video is kind of split into two different parts, actually three. This was the introduction, and the other part is explaining why in Cave you need to do a little bit more things to have this working and ready, while in other engines, because I know every video I make, there's someone in the comments commenting out, oh, in other engine, we don't need to do this and that. So why Cave Engine requires this and why probably it will still require that in the future. And then the last part will be the actual tutorial. So if you are only interested in the actual tutorial, I will try to leave the timestamps here so you can have understand everything a little bit better. So I'll leave the timestamps. But before, let's go ahead and explain this a little bit. But one quick message: during the entire month of November, Cave Engine is actually on sale due to the Black Friday. I decided to extend to the entire month, so make sure you check it out, the discount, because it's not 10, it's not 20, it's not 30%, it's way more. So it's a very good deal for you to check it out. I'll leave the link in the description, and also I'll try to pin in the first comment. Okay, so let's go ahead and explain why Cave Engine don't have a clear way and why this tutorial even exists. But first, just one quick thing here. Okay, let me explain, and then I go to this quick thing. Basically, when I was writing the terrain system for a cave, which is this one that you are actually looking at, I had to research a lot. It was like a many months researching, trying to understand how other game engines, I'm talking about the big ones, I'm talking about the Frostbite, mainly from DICE, that powers Battlefield and all that, Unreal Engine and etc. How does other game engines does the terrain? What is the trade-offs? What is the pros and cons of every single approach? Because this way we will be able to create a much better, versatile, and modular terrain system for Cave. So this is how Cave Engine terrain system started existing. It was a lot of research, a lot of things, and something that I realized very quickly is that we can make some very advanced stuff in the terrain system. We can make like crazy stuff. Let's go back to the rosy. Create systems to have layered materials that we can have like 10, 20, or 100 materials. We can have different blend modes between the materials, so we can have like rocks blending between the grass and all that, and the sand, especially Frostbite, the Electronic Arts game engine. I believe it's currently maintained by DICE, that does Battlefield and stuff. You know the engine, right? They do have a bunch of content online showcasing the engine and the terrain system, and it's very versatile and it's huge and it's amazing. And at first glance, the first idea that I had, and I even started implementing this in Cave, is to actually implement something exactly like that. So imagine you open Cave and you immediately have battlefield level terrain for you to create your games. And I'm specifically talking about the vegetation, actually, the painting here of the terrain. So this was the first idea, but I scrapped this idea. And as a matter of fact, I'm not the only one who scrapped this idea, because Unreal Engine 5 actually doesn't have a default way to paint multiple materials in the terrain system. And you may look at me and say, okay, Guilherme, you are wrong, because in Unreal, you just need to create a material here for the terrain, and then you connect a bunch of nodes to create the different materials for you to paint the terrain slots that Unreal Engine have, and that's it. Well, this is actually the same here in Cave. Now you understand, because what Unreal is doing behind the scenes is allowing you to create a custom shader to render the terrain in a custom way, and you can do whatever you want. You can follow the tutorial and do the terrain slot just like most people do, but you can go crazy if you want. And Cave Engine, in other words, Unreal Engine does not have like a default ready. You don't need to do anything to create the multiple layers in the terrain system, just like Cave. The only difference is that Cave right now yet doesn't have a visual scripting, so for many people it may sound crazy to do the same thing in Cave, and I will show you in this video that it's not. It's actually very, very simple, okay? So don't worry about that, it'll be super easy for you to do it. But why I decided to follow this route? Basically, I realized that to create an advanced system like Frostbite does and etc., there's a bunch of extra overhead that you need to do, a bunch of extra processing. Again, this is behind the scene. You as the developer, as a game developer, you don't need to worry about that. This is engine stuff, right? But the problem is we need to do this processing, we need to do a bunch of crazy stuff that I'm not bothering you with the details here, and this costs performance. And for a game like Battlefield, where the terrain is like something very important, and maybe you are creating a game where the terrain system is something very important. Let's say that you need to spend 2 milliseconds in your entire 16 milliseconds frame budget just to do this pre-processing so you can render the terrain a bit more efficiently. So in the end, you spend like 5 or 6 or 7 milliseconds or even half of the frame rendering the terrain, and then the other half of the frame you spend rendering like the battlefield characters, the vehicles, the constructions, the particle effects and all that. This is just an example, okay? I'm not saying that this is the actual stats that Battlefield uses or the actual stats that Cave Engine would have. This is just a random number for you to understand. So this is an overhead that maybe if the terrain is very important for your game, it's okay for you. And it's like half of your game anyways, so it takes half of the frame, it's fine anyways. But the problem is Cave Engine is a general purpose game engine, so maybe you are using this engine to create a game with a bunch of terrains, but maybe you're creating a game with no terrains at all. Well, in this case, you're probably good to go, but maybe you want to have a terrain just to, I don't know, have some mountains in the distance, just like that. Right now, you have a mountain in the distance, you don't worry about painting the terrain, you don't worry about anything. Maybe you just want to do like I did here with a low poly texture. Let's see, mud texture, here we go. Maybe you want to do this, right, in the terrain. By the way, I'll explain later why this is pixelated. It's for a game that we're working here. This is what I wanted to explain later. But anyways, maybe you just want to do this, right? Well, good, you can do it. But now you have a very good and very expensive, very crazy advanced terrain system in your game that is eating unnecessarily 2 milliseconds of your frame, or 3 milliseconds, or 5 milliseconds, and this is unnecessary for your game. But the problem is that there's no way to turn this off, because this is part of the engine. This is part of the built-in terrain, and this is a problem. So I had to do some trade-offs trade-offs, of course. Game engine development is a bunch of trade-offs all the time, because this is a general purpose. For example, I want to have sky in Cave, and this sky, as you can see here, Cave engine now have a better sky. Let me actually bring back the mist, because it's weird to not have it. It's a better sky, but this sky do have a cost, just like anything else. And I need to think about if it's good to add this cost to everyone using the engine or not. Or even better, if I have a way to add this cost optionally only for the ones who want this advanced feature. And this is mostly the way that we do. For example, for the sky here in Cave, if you don't want the sky, you can simply get rid of this sky. That's it. And it will not gonna continue to be rendering. I mean, in this example it will, because I'm using here for the ambient occlusion, but you get the idea. If I delete it here, it will not gonna do anything anymore for you. But if you want to have a sky, you can do it. Maybe you want to have a different sky. Maybe you want to have this weird mud texture that is pixelated in the sky. You can do it, and now we don't have the extra cost of the sky, because it's a texture that you can replace. But it's a bit trickier when it comes to the terrain. And then we go full circle into why you need to do a bit of stuff here in the systems for Cave to allow that. And just like Unreal, Cave Engine allows you to extend this, and we provide the tools for you as a developer to extend as you want. So if you want to create a crazy advanced terrain system that takes half of the frame to render, good, you can do it. But if you don't want to, the default one will be very nice for you. So that's basically the explanation. I know that I've explained a lot, but every time I do a video like that, someone in the comments always comments something like that, so I need to explain. So basically, too long, don't read for this. The reason why you need to do a little bit of work in Cave to make sure this works is so the extra overhead of the terrain is optional. So if you're not using this advanced terrain in your game, you don't need to have it. That's basically it. Okay, and I wish it was as simple as a toggle, a switch that you add to click here to enable advanced terrain, but it's not quite there yet, and this will have a lot of other trade-offs that, believe me, I studied a lot before saying this. So for now, we need to do an extra work. Okay, explanations, this is done. Now let's go ahead and implement this for this project here. And before that, before we implement everything, I just want to quickly explain what's going on here and why I do have pixelated game. If you follow our studio, Uniday Studio, you know that we really like this style, and we are working here on a shooter game, and it's a fun shooter game. It's a bit weird. I'm not gonna even show you the audio a little bit right now, because let me actually show some of the assets that we've been working on. You can see that all the assets that we have are pixelated, are low poly, and all this weird I don't know, low poly stuff. We like to do this stuff here, and the cool thing about Cave is that, well, we can do this in Cave. If you don't like it, you don't need to do it, but we like to do it, so I'm doing. So this is why I'm just quickly explaining to you why this game looks very pixelated, and the terrain that I'm about to create, all the textures here will be 128 by 128, but you can use 4K textures if you want. You can use normal maps and crazy stuff. Cave Engine allows that, which is very nice, by the way. Anyways, so let's go ahead and jump to the video. I'll actually disable the face cam now, so it's a bit easier for you to follow along. And what we are about to do here is, as I promised, we will have the setup to paint multiple materials. And what materials I have, it's good to explain to you. I do have this mud material here, which is this mud texture that I've downloaded from Polyheaven, and I actually uploaded this to Photoshop and reduced the resolution to 128 by 128. By the way, you can do the same thing here in Cave. You can resize an image if you want, but well, I did this in Photoshop because I was prepping everything. I do have the grass texture, which is this one, and I do have the rock textures that I'm trying to figure out which one will fit the best. I do have a bunch of different ones here. I have this one, but I believe this one is too similar to the mud. So maybe you have to swap it. I have this one, and last but not least, I have this one, which is darker. So we'll see here which one will fit better, okay? But anyways, let's go ahead, disable the face scan, and try to paint this right now. All right, face scan disabled. This is the tutorial part. The first thing I would do is I'll duplicate this mud material here. So I'll click here, duplicate, and I'll actually name it as terrain 1. Terrain 01. Good. And I will actually create a folder here. This is just organization to my materials. And I'll move all my materials and all my images to these materials, okay? This is, by the way, the materials are optional. All you have to do is to have the images here, so we know, but I'm keeping the material just as a reference. And now I will apply this terrain 1 to my terrain. As you can see, I can just drag and drop and it will be here. Good. So now the other thing that we need to do is to create a custom shader for this, this terrain. So if I right click here, I can click here to create a new asset. Then I'll go ahead and find the shader program. I will click and I'll create the terrain shader. Then I will select my terrain material and I'll drag and drop my terrain shader to the shader override here, or I can click here and select my shader. So you can see nothing changed because the new shader in Cave is exactly the same shader as the engine is using to handle everything. So this is the starting point for you, but you can extend that endlessly, of course. And one last thing that we are going to do is to select here new asset, and we're going to have to create a new texture here. So I will right click, new asset, and I'll click here to create a new texture. And then I will name this texture as terrain 01 mask. So it's the mask texture that we are going to use in this terrain shader, okay? Now, if I click here in my terrain, and if I change this to the terrain tool and then go to the terrain paint, I will be able to select my terrain mask here. Very simple, and I can start painting my mask. And if I click and drag here, you can see that here in the preview, my mask is actually being painted, which is very nice. If I select my texture, by the way, I can change the resolution. The default is 128 by 128. I will actually change this to 1000. Actually, let me say it's a 2K texture. We're gonna have to create a bigger texture here, okay? So I will change this texture size. All right, so we have now a 2K texture, and by the way, you'll notice that when you resize the texture, the data will be lost and it will be replaced by this random noise here instead, which is like the default Cave engine behavior. So it's important that you resize the texture before you start painting. And of course, if I continue to paint here, let me go back to my terrain tool, select my texture over here, and increase the brush strength. You can see here that it will be appearing here in my texture just fine. But of course, now all we have to do is to translate this into the material. And this is basically a mask that we will be using in the shader to specify, well, we can select one color to be one material and any other color to be another material, and etc. And by the way, some of you may have the idea to immediately use this texture here instead as a material for this terrain. So let's actually go ahead and drop this. You can see that it kind of works, and if I actually select my terrain, go back to the texture paint, you will immediately see this in action. The problem here is that, of course, this works as a base texture, not as the actual texture. Let me actually disable the mist real quick. So this is like one solid 2K color. As you can see, if I go near my terrain, I can see all the pixels, so this is not very high resolution. So what do we want? We don't want to do this, or maybe you want, maybe that's exactly what you want, and it's fine, you don't need to do it. This is, again, the magic of having this system like this is that you can create wherever you want. But we don't want to do this, we want instead to create a mask for our terrain. Let's actually paint this all black, because this is what I want. I want to start with a black texture. Good. This is enough for us. Let's actually go back to 30. And I will actually go back to my material tool, manipulation tool, and I'll drag and drop my terrain material, and I'll actually delete this one that we created just to test. And now the magic will start happening, because we want to make the shader get this texture mask, this terrain mask here as a texture, and actually use this to filter the different other textures that we will have here. So let's do this real quick. And for that, you can select the terrain shader and click here in the fragment shader to add it here in the engine. But in my case, just to make things a little bit easier for you, I will actually be editing this inside Visual Studio. So make sure you save your project, Ctrl S to save this into the disk. And if I go to File and open the project in Explorer, then I open this folder that will open here in Visual Studio. I will be able to see everything that I do have in the engine. By the way, it's always good to remember that you should not modify the contents of this folder, like rename this or move to a folder right here. You should only do this inside Cave, because this will lead into problems, okay? So if I expand my terrain, you will be able to see the terrain shader, and I do have the geometry, the vertex, and the fragment shader. We want to modify the fragment shader, so I'll click here to select it. So this is the regular fragment shader that Cave Ancient have. You will have access to it, and you can modify everything as you need. And it even comes with a default basic shader if you don't like how the engine renders everything, and if you want to start from scratch, you can literally start here and it will create a very bad. Let's actually go ahead here in the terrain shader, recompile, boom, now we don't have anything. Maybe this is what you want, but anyways, this is just an example. Let's go back to the default. As a matter of fact, oops, I have an error here, 1 second. Forgot to save probably. Now it works, good. So let's go ahead here and define some uniforms that we may need. The first uniform that we will have here in my material is the M albedo, and this is default that Cave Ancient have for you. When you import the material here from the default uniforms in Cave, it will come with all those uniforms, oops, right here, that you are seeing here. So we'll actually use the albedo as the first color of our material, good, but I want to add more uniforms to it. So right here, I add this on top, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I add this here, okay? I will create another one. And in Cave, we do have a naming convention that everything that belongs to a material it starts with M underscore. You don't need to do this, but this is just an organization. So you can see here M underscore, this is from a material, and we have a similar naming convention for stuff that belongs to the scene, and this is just for the shaders, okay? But again, you don't need to do this. This is just an explanation, an example. So I want to have a grass texture here, and I also want to have a rock texture here. And last but not least, I want to have my mask texture here, which is the one that we just painted here. So by doing this, by creating those 3 uniforms, if you go back here into the shader and recompile the shader, then if you go back to the terrain and I sync the uniforms, you will see that right here we do have 3 new fields into the material: the grass, the rock, and the mask that we just created. And as you can see here, it is reflected correctly. So what I will do is I will actually populate this, the grass, with the grass material, and the rock with the rock material. Let's try this one first, then we can later on replace. And then we can have the terrain 01 mask over here. So now they are created in the shader. So this is part one, literally the first thing that you need to do, the very simple stuff, okay? But now we need to use this mask to actually define which texture that we are going to use here in this paint. So all you have to do basically is to select this mask here and actually apply this to specify right here in the main which texture get used here in the albedo. What do I mean about that? Let's go ahead. Before we do anything else with this, and IntelliSense here is already using AI to do this. This is the magic of AI. I'm trying to do a tutorial, man. Come on. This is literally doing everything that we need. Well, let's actually try to do this with AI. This is not exactly what I want, because I want to do to use this regular albedo here, because if you remember, we said that we will be using this as the mud. But actually, let's actually change this, not the rock. Instead, I will use the albedo instead. Maybe we'll do the other way around. AI is already doing everything for us. It's crazy. I'm trying to do a tutorial AI. Come on. Anyways, I think it's GitHub Copilot here. But anyways, this is literally everything. If we go ahead and recompile this shader, you can see that the material changed. But now, if I select my terrain again, Shift 2 to go back to the texture paint with my mask selected, I will actually go ahead and select white. It is supposed to have a white one. Let's just see if there's a problem here in my terrain. So I'm selecting the albedo here. 1 second. Oh dear Lord, this is why we don't need to use AI everywhere. This is not the correct UV, because if you remember, in this texture that we have here, this material, the UV here is scaled by 100. And this UV that we retrieved here in the get UVs in cave is actually scaled as well. So we need to use the original UV to get the mask. So instead of UV, I would do FS in, which is fragment shader in, the input, text chord. This is the coordinates of my shader. Now, if I compile this again, you will be able to see that the painting is literally working. And that's it. This is literally it. This is the amount of lines of code that you need to do to have your thing going. You need to do this in the main shader, and of course you need to add the uniforms. Of course, I do have the rock here, and the reason why I do have the rock is because I kind of wanted to do some sort of blending according to the elevation of my terrain. I really like to do this as like an automatic way to do this sort of elevation, which I really like. So what I can do here is to have like a float. I'll actually try to make this up from my head. And I'll ignore the AI this time. Let's take the absolute value from the dot product between the, let me think about this real quick. The current normal, which is fragment shader in dot normal, and the up vector. Yeah, the AI is kind of correct right now. And now, in order to have a correct albedo, I will do a simple stuff right now. I will actually mix the albedo that we currently have with the cliff texture, which is the rock albedo actually. I don't know you guys, but I hate the AI trying to autocomplete me. If it feels like I'm weird, but anyways, it's kind of good to see that it works. So we do have some result, but you can see that it is probably not very visible right now. Maybe here it will be visible, but it's also very ugly, as you can see. But I believe it's because this texture is also very easy to miss, to not see it correctly, you know? So maybe what I need to do is to pull this a little bit to just do some cliff value. I will actually do cliff value equals to pull cliff value. I never know if it's like a it's higher than one and less than one, so I usually try both. So now that I've did this, you can see that I actually have um, this rock textures in the cliff. It's a little bit too much for me. I don't like this much. And also I don't like how it is styling here. You can see it is styling a lot. So an easy poor man's way to fix this in the shader is to simply oh, I'm actually increasing this by 10. And I believe again, this is dumb AI stuff here messing up with my life. Yes, now it looks good. So now we have a material very easily, and I can paint this stuff here. I can actually erase this stuff to go back to the regular grass. Regular, not grass, but sand. And by the way, um, here in the paint mode, you can have individual channel painting, okay? Because this is right now, if you go back here into the shader, you can see that we are only using the red channel, but maybe you want to have more textures. Maybe you want to have, other than the grass and the rock and the mud that we have, you may have a test stuff that you have, a test texture. And then you will have to create to get a new mask value, which is the green value or the blue value, to make sure that you have this test thing. So this is literally why you can have individual channel painting. And as you can see, since we are only really using the red channel, we can already start seeing that it is starting to change the color because I'm only painting the red. But if I go to the green channel and paint, you will see no effect here in this shader because again, we are not using the green channel here, only the red. So this is a very simple way. Look at that. Very easily, we can have a better terrain system here. So if I save and if I play the game, now we have a better terrain. Oops, now I crashed the engine. But that's okay. As you can see here on top, this is the development branch because of course here in the studio we always use the development branch. So there is other stuff going on here that it's not related to the terrain. It's probably something else, but I will look into this later and you're not gonna have to worry about that. Anyways, so this is the quick tutorial on how to create the terrain with different colors and all that. And remember, if you need to have normal maps and etc., the logic is very simple. I actually have another project here that I can show you that we have in the studio going on. And this is a very similar terrain shader, except that we do have normal maps for the cliff. This is a realistic game. This is not a not realistic one. So we have the cliff and the cliff normal map. You can see that we do have the ground normal map and then the terrain mask and the terrain normal map, which is good as well. And the way we do things here are very similar here. So you can see that I'm sampling the terrain mask, except that I'm using the different colors here. And for the cliff, I'm actually doing some, I don't remember the name of this technique, but I'm basically the way we did here, the cliff texture is being projected from the top. So you may see some distortion here if you look sideways. In this case here, you're not seeing because this is a pixelated texture, so you're not going to be able to see it. But in a realistic scenario, you will see some distortion. So we do have multiple texture samplings here to make sure that we have a correct mix. So, but this is advanced stuff anyways. But you can see you can have with a little bit more work, you can have extra stuff going on in your shader, which is very nice. But that's it for this video, folks. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one.